There we go. We're on.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Winephabet Street. And this is a special edition of Winephabet Street. We pushed it back an extra week, and it is day drinking for us today because I am at 10 a.m., Deb is at 1 p.m., and our guest, Nicholas Hammeken, is 5 p.m.?
6 p.m.
6 p.m. I had a 50-50 shot there. 6 p.m. So we are on the letter M today, and we are talking Monastrell. So do we want to do intros first, Deb, or go right into the video and then get going?
Why don't we do intros and then quick intros into the video? And then we'll hand it off to Nicholas.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Nicholas Hammeken. I'm the founder and the CEO of a company called Hamekin Cellars in Spain, which has existed 24 years now. And Hamekin Cellars is founded on Monastrell. All began with Monastrell and has since expanded to other regions, part of Spain, where we do a lot of Tempranillo, Garnacha, Albarino, Godeo. But it all began with Monastrell in the southeastern part of Spain, in Murcia region, where we made wines as from 96 in Jumilla and in Yecla, which we're going to taste later on in the program. And our approach is making modern Spanish wine. That's our interpretation of how wine from Spain should taste nowadays.
All right, that is awesome. And I love that you focused in on one grape variety to start the winery with. And, you got to pick your niche and go with what you love. Go with what you love.
Absolutely. So do you want to introduce yourself? And then
sure.
And then we'll do the video?
Sure. So
okay.
For those of you who don't know me, I am your co-host, Lori. My husband and I own Draceana Wines in Paso Robles. I also write the blog and produce the podcast under Exploring the Wine Glass. I'm WSET Level 2 certified sommelier service and now champagne specialist. Thanks to COVID and having a little extra time to do some studying, I finally finished that class. So welcome, everybody. Deb?
And I'm Debbie Gioquindo. I'm a certified specialist of wine and a champagne and port specialist as well. And I go under the Hudson Valley Wine Goddess. And I'm a wine blogger, wine writer. I'm author of Tapping the Hudson Valley. And I'm a co-owner of a restaurant, Kitchen 330, that unfortunately we just closed our doors, but we are looking for a new home. So I think that's it in a nutshell.
All right, and on to bigger and better things with Kitchen 330.
That's right.
All right, so we're here with the letter M today, so let's get going. I don't know why we get that echo sometimes, but I don't know. We're going to have to work on that one. But you know what? When you love the alphabet song twice as much isn't so bad. Anyway, so we are here today for the letter M. So Nicholas, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to share your expertise on Monastrell. And the first question I always ask is the origin story. So what got you into wine? When did you fall in love with wine and know that this is where you wanted to go with your life?
Well, basically, I'm born and raised in Denmark, and I started my life as a cellar master in Denmark, in Copenhagen. And when I finished my business studies and my job as a cellar master, I had the opportunity to work in Germany. I had the opportunity to work in France and Spain as a post-graduation experience. And then I worked 10 years in in UK, worked for a company owned by Seagrams at that time called Utpins. And that really sort of trained me to do what I'm doing now, because I was having a technical background. And then suddenly I understood what the commercial need is when you talk to consumers. My wife, Lotte, who is a dentist, she got a job in Spain. And that was in 96. And then I hadn't a lot of experience with Spain at that time. I had a fantastic time in the northern part of Spain, but I, at that time, felt that you had a great potential with Spanish wines. They were in early 90s, they were quite rustic, the wines, but beneath that, they had a great fruit. So when we moved down in 96, I had opportunities to start with one winery in Jumilla, and that's called Finca Luzon now, and that's widely distributed in the US market. And I managed to start up working with a winery called Castaño, also widely distributed in the US market. And that's sort of in the beginning, and trying to sell their wine in certain markets gave me sort of the courage to sort of say, okay, I really like what's happening in Spain. I think that by getting a little bit more discipline in what you're doing, when you do the harvesting, apply some techniques, this country has a great opportunity to evolve something much bigger. So it was, I think it's something about the timing. It was really good timing, because it was just there when it started. You had a second generation of winemakers going out, traveling, coming back, being curious about what the Spanish wine industry is all about. And since early 2000, when we started to do our own wines, it has grown since. We were sort of initially, we were a little bit insecure on which style and which direction we should go, until we suddenly defined, okay, we want to play with Spanish varietals such as Monastrell, Garnacha, Tempranillo. And when we figured that out, then suddenly it was pretty straightforward. So we wanted to go in and respect the typicity of the region, but we wanted to do our interpretation, and we wanted particularly try to apply some of the New World techniques, be a little bit more cautious with the fruit, since Spain is a very hot, in many places, a hot climate like California. You have to be particularly careful. If we talk with a grape variety Monastrell, which is a bit susceptible to oxidation, you have to be even more careful. And this is the way we played along. So our wines, the way we do our business since actually nearly day one, is that we want to give that sort of modern twist, modern expression of how we believe Spanish wine should taste. And that is focused on the fruit. It should be that freshness you have and that pure expression of the varietal. Sometimes with oak, other times without oak. So
now, was the grape always in Spain? Is that the home, the birthplace, or was it like brought in from France originally, or anything like that?
As far as I know, it's always been in Spain. And what is peculiar about Monastrell is 70%. I'm not really sure, to be frank, but 70% of all Monastrell wine is produced in the Levante and Murcia region.
Oh.
So the Levante is Valencia, Alicante region on the eastern side towards the Mediterranean Sea. And then you're slightly inland, you have Murcia, which is Jumilla or Jumilla, Yecla, and Buyas. So that actually surprised you that it's such a big part of the world production is in these two areas. When you have famous areas like Chateauneuf that produces their fantastic Chateauneuf wines, or you have Mataro from Australia. But that's how it is.
And do you think, like, where did the diversion of the name come from? Like, so Monastrell, like, you talk to Americans, and I was saying, we're doing Anne for Monastrell, and they didn't even, a large number of people don't even recognize that name, because
but if
we
you
don't call it that here.
They do.
Right.
So
but that,
grape with
I always try to say, I always begin with the story of Mourvedre. because there's some people who have tasted a Rhone wine and then suddenly, okay, so it's that kind of spicy style of grape. Correct. And then we take it from there. And then I said, well, in Spain it's called Monastrell, Mazzaro in Australia, and then we take it, move on. So that's how I explain it, the name of the varietal.
Do you think that that's a problem? Because, there's other grape, Syrah and Shiraz, the same concept of it's the same grape, but a different name by the region. Do you find that a marketing problem? Or
if realistically, from a marketing perspective, there's only two famous things in Spain if you look to enter the American market, and that's two brands, Rioja and Tempranillo. That's what the consumer knows. And everything is a nice add-on. Some people know a little bit of something called Albarino, but it's more niche. And that's what we have to bear in mind. So of course it is a challenge. But it's about when we do the styles for, let's say, the US market, it's more that you have to make sure that you make the correct style, which is adequate for your market to get the attention.
What makes, in your mind, Monastrell stand out as a wine?
Well, I think it all began when dear Robert Parker, he was actually helping us many, many years ago when he was at his acid height, because he was able to go out and not only sort of explain about the famous wine from Ribera del Duero and Rioja. No, he was actually able to tell you have these rich style of wines, voluptuous fruit, that can go, that copes quite well with oak, and then that kind of richness made the Monastrell famous at that time. So one of the things with Monastrell is that you have to be careful you don't make it too big. So if you do too much extraction, you make gigantic wines. And at that time when Parker introduced the wines, it was very much in the vogue that to have big and rich wines. That didn't really matter. Because it was wine. Some of the wines were on testosterone, I would say. They were powerful wines, but also quite seductive. And you could get some bargain wines at $10, $12, $15, up to $20. Some wine that had a great score. So from that aspect, our dear Parker helped us to introduce Monastrell as what has become sort of recognized in Monastrell nowadays. Nowadays, the pendulum has changed, and we make sort of, I would say, more balanced, more fresh style of wines, because the market is looking for these kind of wines nowadays.
So let's go into a little bit of the grape itself, because I'm like dorky like that. So the grape itself, like, what do the clusters look like? Are we large berries, small berries, thick skinned, thin skinned, early ripening, late ripening?
Yeah, they're quite thick skinned grapes. So they have a thick skin, and what is peculiar about this late ripening varietal is that you have to make really sure when it ripes, because it ripes around October, end of September, early October, and then it goes on, is the phenolic ripeness. Because initially it can look, well, the wine has got 14.5, 15% alcohol, everything looks hunky-dory, but it still tastes green. So you have to be very site specific when you do the harvesting. Some places you got a fully phenolic ripe wine at 14% alcohol. Other places you need it to be 15 and a half. They're sort of fairly sized bunch. Sometimes they can be smaller, depending on the old vines. You have still a lot of old bush vines, and when you get those, then they're quite small. The yield is extremely small on the old vines. Can be down to less than 10 hectoliters per hectare. I don't know really what is your conversion with acres, but it's really minimal. And it's that kind of your borderline. Is it? Does it make sense from a financial perspective? That's the kind of question you sometimes ask. But it's really small volume.
I was trying to do the math here. Yeah, so I noticed that some of your wines are are like 45 years old.
Yes.
So that was going to be my question: is that seriously changes it obviously changes, as you were saying, the quantity that's being produced, the production of it, and the grapes, they're smaller. So are you balancing the old vine with the newer vine, or are you?
In many cases, yes. In many cases, when we do, for example, larger production of organic wines, the question would be yes. But when we talk about wines like the Criantia, we're going to taste later, Criantia wines. Here we talk about dry farm wines. So no drop irrigation. You talk about old vines, and that's the normal old farming. That how you did it. So that's what we like to do, because they have a much more balanced acidity. They're much fresher, and when we can achieve that, that's really what we want to go for. You reach a certain stage where the vines gets too old and the yield's too low. But when we can, and when we're allowed to get hold of these ungrafted dry farm Monastrell, we love it, because they have in my opinion, a distinctive taste, and they're better able to cope with the heat. I think they're more heat resistant, to be frankly honest. They get less stressed. So.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm just still going on my grapes. Sorry. So in terms of their vegetative state, are they highly productive? Do you need to trim back to keep the vine in balance? Like, what is your pruning protocol to maintain the balance of the vine?
It's more sort of the normal pruning protocol during summertime, but they're not high yield. They're not high yield at all, because you have to think about where we are producing these wine. It's borderline desert. Okay. So it's very low yield, low amount of water, no drop irrigation, a lot of sun. So you hardly ever see big production, and that's the reality. Right? So
you touched on like almost desert. I want to get into the dirt here, the soil.
Yeah,
soil that Monastrell likes to grow in, and what it grows best in.
So basically, a lot of the soil in the Murcia region is sandy and gravel soil. It can also be a little bit of clay in certain areas, but a lot of big stone. And there's some places that reminds me of Chateauneuf, with these big stones in the vineyards, and that have a great similarity. The density is very little with the older vines in the vineyards, and there's a lot of space in between them. That's normally how it is. So it really drains when it rains. There's a good drainage. It just goes straight through the water, to be frankly honest. What is the difference is with the Monastrell planted and where we are situated is the altitude. We got around from 4 to 5 meters altitude up to 900 meters altitude. So there's quite a big difference in the altitude from where you pick the grapes and where you plant the grapes. And of course, that gives different style of wines we can play with when we want to do the blends.
So the different altitude, it produces different characteristics in the grapes?
Yes, because some of the vineyards are closer to the Mediterranean Sea, and they'll be sort of slightly warmer during the night, both warm during the day and not warm, but warmer during the night, where you have more continental climate further inland, where you have great heat during the day, but it cools down at night. So that's the kind of thing you can play with. I mean, sometimes you want to have a more floral notes, then you take the cooler vineyards, and if you want to have the more spicy notes, then we maybe take from some other part. So that's sort of a decision the winemaker takes.
Now, do you do separate fermentations and then blend when you're making your wine?
We do it a lot. We're trying to separate all the vineyards, all the plot. So we do them sort of fermentate site specific, and then afterwards we blend.
Okay.
Yeah, give us more flexibility. Obviously, we have an idea of what we want to achieve by all means, but it gives you sort of a greater palette to play with of flavors.
Do you take, when you do your blending trials, do you base it on the previous year? So you have a bottle of the previous year, what you made, and with the percentages from each vineyard, and start out with that to see if that's achieving what you want, and then play with the percentages from there?
I just spoke to some of my colleagues here before this video call. And for example, 2019 was an absolutely amazing year, historical year. Everything was perfect. And then you get 2020, which is a more challenging year that turned out to be okay, good. And there we were not able to copy 2019. That was just not a possibility. So we're just trying to sort of to do all the things, make sure that we had healthy grapes to pick and take it from there. So I think always when you try to do something, by all means, we have recipes how we want to achieve things. But Mother Nature sometimes tells us things are not like that always. So you also have to do a lot of improvisation when you do things. But obviously, we have a clear idea of what we want to achieve.
Right. Right.
So we want that freshness in the wines. We want that sort of optimal phenolic ripeness. So you have that smooth tannins, very important to us. And we want a style that what we call our high style. So that you would definitely taste in our wines.
And your barrel protocol seems to be 100% French oak.
In these cases, when we can get away and when we feel rich enough, then we use French oak. But I would say to these style of wines, it just the French oak and also many times use French oak give that little bit of spiciness, and that depends a little bit the style of wine we want to make. We're not shy of using American oak, but we want to use it in a balanced way so the oak doesn't take over. The fruit is always the most important thing for us, and then if the oak can support the fruit, then we're very happy about it.
And is your French oak? Are you using new? I know you said when dollars matter because they always do, but is it typically new French oak, or are you balancing some new French oak with?
It's very much a mix because actually I like both. Yes, of course, new French oak. If I could choose every time, we would only use French 500 American oak from Burgundy. Fantastic, but we can't afford it. So that's reality. But then I also like sometimes they use 1 or 2 year old used oak from very good suppliers we have of oak. We got some very good context, and what oak can do there, just give that what sometimes those particular wines need. So it's very much case by case, I have to say.
Okay. And how much does Monastrell love that oak? Are you losing a lot to that angel share? Is it absorbing into it?
Yeah, it does well. It's not a major problem. It's not a major problem. What we're more concerned about is the oxidation, because Monastrell is an oxidative grape variety. So you have to be really careful. You have to make sure that you're constantly topping the barrels and all that stuff. From my perspective there, I'm a bit more hysterical there. And I want to make sure that all our wines have that freshness. And when I say freshness, because I'm against that rustic notes, that I'm not very keen on. And if you're not really careful here over the summer, normally the wine would be fantastic. When you have a new harvest, the wine starts to open around May the following year, and you start sort of to have those after being very closed and start to open up and be very aromatic during the summer. But if you're not really careful about it, then you will get some rustic notes after the summer heat, where it becomes incredible hot over the summer. So that's why we are very disciplined about it, keep a very cool temperature, and just make sure that we don't have any oxidation. Where oxidation for the grape variety plays a big part, it doesn't work well for Monastrell.
And what would you say, like if somebody is new to Monastrell, how would you describe the aromas and the palate to somebody?
Yeah, for me, it's give a classic. Got these sort of gorgeous berry fruit, and sometimes you can have notes of if you had a non-oak Monastrell, it could be quite floral. It can also, when it gets a little bit of age, get spicy white pepper notes, which is quite typical for And you can also get some kind of notes of herbs. And that depends a little bit from which part of the region they comes from. And that's very distinctive for the wine. When I feel that you sometimes, if what you have to be careful of, if you extract the wine too much, then you would get afterwards dark licorice notes of that. And that becomes a little bit too dominant. It takes over your blend. So that's why I would say, I would warn people to say, be careful, not going over the top, because the evolution will be a little bit difficult. When it evolves, then you definitely have notes of plums, these kind of flavors shine through. And you will have that kind of a richness on the palate.
Okay. So in terms of your fruit themselves, are you estate or are you sourcing or a combination of both?
No, we're sourcing. We are, as a company, what you call asset light. So we are using other people's facilities. And people we've known for many, many years. Some we known, many of them 10, 15, 20 years plus. So we are what you call friendly competitors. They have their style of wine. We have our style. And we go to the fairs and try to sell as much as we can. But we drink beers afterwards. So,
there you go.
Yep.
There you go.
Good beer makes good wine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you were talking about the aromas, I was smelling the wine, and what a difference.
Absolutely.
What a difference.
Huge difference. And then obviously it's done on purpose. We want to sort of highlight different style. And which one did you smell of the three? Did you smell all of them?
I smelled all three of them. Do we want to go in, Laurie, to talk about them?
Yeah, sure. It sounds like a perfect time.
Yeah. So we have the
Juventud.
Yeah, Juventud is the younger style of the three Monastrell wines we are having today. And basically what is interesting about this wine is that it's this Monastrell is dry farmed, and it comes from ungrafted vines. And these ungrafted wines have this kind of peculiar things about it. Then they maintain the freshness much more. So they get, and their acidity is much better in the wine, so they have a much better longevity. And in this case, we are using small French barrels. When I say small, we play around with some wines. We play with 225 liters French barrels, new and used oak. And we also play with some of the top wines with 500 liter barrels from Burgundy. We get French wine. So that's why I'm telling that. So here we have the 17. And as you can see, it's still got that beautiful reddish color.
17.
Yeah. So what is quite important is the color. If you look at the color, is something it's very important to us that we have that sort of still reddish color. It shouldn't be brown. And then again, first the fruit. We're going into 2017, so we're starting to get those secondary aromas now, but they should be a nice balance between sort of the secondary aromas of a Monastrell and the oak. So we first want the fruit, the notes, and then just afterwards we would like the oak to kick in.
Nice, like you said, freshness, nice freshness. I forgot to taste the 15.
Yeah.
And now when you're saying ungrafted, are you meaning that that these vines have been planted themselves, or that they are ungrafted on their own rootstock?
On their own rootstock. It's pre-phylloxera crops. Because what is peculiar here is in this part of the world, because it's so sandy, the phylloxera never succeeded. It came in 1920 in some part of this area and wiped it out. But phylloxera doesn't like when it's too sandy. When there's a too small a percentage of clay, it doesn't work out. So here you have pockets of these pre-phylloxera ungrafted Monastrell, which are something we try to preserve because they get some kind of uniqueness to the wine.
And both of those they're strikingly different.
Yes.
Right? The 15 was smoother, had a little bit, for me, more body. The 17, you could tell it's fresher, it's more fun. It was kind of dancing on your palate more, where the 15 was more serious.
So
Correct.
I'm sorry, Debbie, because so I don't have you have 2 bottles of the Juventud, a 15 and a 17, or
no, the 17 is the Juventud and the 15 is the Con.
It's the Attitude.
Attitude.
With it.
Okay, so that's 12 months. That's 12 months.
So obviously that is very right. It's 2 different, very distinct styles. Where with the second wine you're tasting, Attitude 2015, the oak element plays a much bigger part.
Yes,
We have a much more structured wine,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why the wines have needed more oak here to cope with all that tannin, all that sort of extraction. So the oak. We're not trying to using oak, but we want to use a nice oak that doesn't take over, but it complements the fruit. And that's what's really sort of our mindset all the time. And what's peculiar about 15 was a dreadful vintage. It was very, very tough. So you had to do, as a winemaker, there was a lot of work for the 6 winemakers in our team to do that. They really had to be very selective. And I think they've done a stellar job by achieving what they achieved. I'll let Debbie judge that. But
yeah, I mean, they're both very nice, completely different expressions. The 17 is more fresh, a little bit more acidity to it.
Correct.
Yeah.
So are you producing? So and then you also have a Virtud, which is 15 months in oak. So
yes.
Each vintage, are you producing these 3 wines?
Virtud is only top vintages. We're doing that. That's something. So we're not going to do it in all the vintages.
Is this one what you're talking about?
No, it's another.
Is this the one that we don't have that you were going to talk about?
We don't have, correct. But it's basically. The same philosophy, but from vineyard to vineyard, sometimes you have top vineyards, and they just need a different kind of attention, and they can cope with more oak. And in this time, when we made the batch, we found that this one was able to cope with the bigger barrels. What I particularly like about the big oak barrels of 500 liter, I find particularly for a lot of Spanish wine, it gives a really nice balance between oak and fruit, or fruit and oak. It really complements it. And the surface with the barrel versus the amount of liters you got in is works out quite nicely. It doesn't never get tired. It always maintains the freshness. So that's the major difference.
So I get, I'm just a little confused, but it's early here. So you pull in a vintage, right? And are you tasting that wine and you're deciding whether it's a Juventud or an Acuta?
When we choose, it's between Attitude and Virtud, the 2 top wines.
Okay.
So with the Juventuds, it's a different style of wine we're making.
Okay.
Right?
Got it.
So that's we already.
You blend from your different areas and different plots for each of them.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, certain plots are just outstanding. So they will, whatever happens, they will produce very nice fruit. So there's certain vineyards that is, if everything goes well, that will be destined to some top wines. And then you got other vineyard plots that we normally would make with other wines. And so we got a very clear idea of what we want to do. You can be surprised from time to time when you say there's something that overperform, something disappoint, and that sort of time tells. But you have a general pretty good idea what you want to achieve and what can be done.
And then, so the third bottle you have, Deb, is the Gran Pastas.
Yep.
So,
and it's harvested in October when the grapes have the highest concentration of flavors and aromas. So let's talk about this wine a little bit.
Yeah, so now we're moving from, we began in Romia. Romia is an area of 30,000 hectares, where the next one we're going to Yekla is only 3,600 hectares. I suppose, what is that, 8,000 acres?
2.4 acres to
2.5.
hectare.
Okay, yeah, plus 8,000. And basically what we want to do here is what we want to revive an old tradition from the Murcia and Levante region, and that is doing this very, very long harvest. You started as a farmer to pick grapes end of August, sometime nowadays early August, but the harvest going on till end of October, early November. It just go on forever. And when the logistic was not very good in old days, suddenly you just got overwhelmed with all these grapes, and you nearly forgot some of the vineyards, and they start to shrivel the grapes on the vines. So you had a lot sort of more natural sweetness in these grapes, and that's something we tried to do with the Gran Pasas, make this style of wine as well. So this is sort of a smoother style of wine. Quite rich, but Yecla, compared to our wine from Romia, is make fresher wines. It's a region where it's can be a little bit cooler. It depends on where you are with your sites, specifically vineyards. But in general, I feel that the wines are less powerful compared to the Romia wines.
Now it says here it's 12.1
residual.
Yeah, residual grams per liter of
Yeah.
sugar. I can taste the sweetness, but it's not overly sweet from the high acidity of the grape, and it balances it out. Because I was like, wow, this is not bad, and I'm very sensitive to sweetness.
Yeah.
And it is lovely. You would never know it was 12 grams per liter.
And this is only when you gain these super healthy grapes that has a good level of acidity. Otherwise, you will have that kind of cloy sensation. You will have that kind of stickiness, and that's what we want to avoid. We want to have that freshness, that clear your palate. So you want to next sip.
It's definitely fresh.
So obviously,
it's very well balanced.
Having a wine tasting, because you can't. It's difficult to say how much residual sugar is in the wine. I would struggle to say it had 12 myself.
Yeah, it's very well balanced.
Yeah.
Extremely well balanced.
And so is this produced only in certain vintages when everything comes?
No, it's quite stable.
Okay.
Spain as a country is fairly stable. So we always, despite all the challenges we are having, particularly in the Murcia region, we are nearly always able to make these wines. Not always, but nearly. So, but in a year like this, normal classic year, we're able to do it this year as well. So, but it is really weird to see these old vines with these small bunches of grapes left hanging there. It looks a bit weird, I have to say, but make some gorgeous wines.
I saw some pictures on your Instagram feed of the grapes. I personally think they're pretty, but that's okay. So the other wines, the first ones that you tasted, go under the label of Crincia.
Yep.
So that means belief. So
Yes.
Can you tell us how that name plays into your vision for the wine itself?
Or should I just read what it says here on the bottle?
You can read.
It says here, Crincia for our winemaker means belief. Belief in the dark attitude of Monastrell. Belief in the dry farm methods that enrich our harvest. Belief that 12 months on French oak gives an intriguing intensity to be appreciated. Belief that the fusion of our winemaking styles. Belief that you will have an unforgettable experience.
Yep.
I love that.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
So that's very much what it's all about. Pasas obviously means raisin in Spanish. So that's the kind of raisiny effect we want to get when the grapes start to shrivel on the vine, and that's why we were able to register Pasas. We have a normal Pasas as well, which is a little bit the same kind of way we were thinking about making a fresher style, a little bit like the Juventud, The wine we are doing in that family range is a younger, so it's now 2019. And here you're having a more playing with elements of the herbs. It's got more sort of notes of herbs among the fruit as well, and it's quite silky smooth on the palate. So different interpretation of how Monastrell can taste.
Yes.
And
So-
where? Go ahead, Deb.
No, you go ahead, because I'm going to change the subject. So you go ahead.
Okay. So with these, the 6 months, the 12 months, the 15 months, where do you see the window of drinking for these wines? The Juventud, I'm thinking you're releasing with the expectation that they're going to drink that pretty young, but
Correct.
as they get older, the Virtud, what's the laying down ability? The cellaring for these.
With the acidity these wines have got, they can keep for a long time. The big ones, the Attitude and the Virtud. So it's when we release the wines, our purpose always that you can drink them when we release the wines. It's not something you have to put in your cellar 3 years. However, they can age very nicely because of the acidity, and they will have. So we would release them when they have sort of done their sort of primary fruit, and we go into the sort of secondary kind of fruit, and then take it from there. We started with the 2015 harvest, and now we sort of see how the wines are evolving. And it is actually quite interesting to see with the Attitude and the Virtud, they really start to open up now. So that means that they're probably sort of 4 or 5 years and beyond is when you really sort of would get a great drinking pleasure out of these wines.
What is the prices? Do you know of
The
the wine?
prices on the Juventud Grenza is $14.95 retail.
Oh, wow.
On the Attitude is $22.95, and on the Grand Passes is $14.95.
Wow. Fantastic prices.
Yeah.
I mean, this is an everyday drinking, reach
Pleasure.
for all around. It's just not, taste, but taste, price, the whole package. I mean, it's but wine doesn't matter. It should be every day because you never know what tomorrow brings. But, but definitely, this is definitely, now this is where I'm going to change the subject, go into food pairings. I can see a burger with this, and I can see duck meatballs with this. What kind of food would you pair with?
We would like, and normally I'd say now we're going into the fall, we like sort of the little bit richer style. A stew, for example, is fantastic nowadays. And the weekends with a nice stew, when you have a little bit more time to prepare food, that's nice because you got that richness from the stew, pairs really well with the wines. We love these wines with our traditional paella, the rice dishes, works very well. So these kind of things goes really well. And also you sort of, a lot of roasted meat is what you need. I would say the Attitude is nice for something a bit more meaty things that goes really well. Where Juventud and Grand Pas are a bit more versatile with the food pairing.
How about cheeses? What type of cheeses would you pair?
Deb knows me so well.
But the pastas, I would say the pastas with the cheeses, because when you have that kind of little bit softness, then both the hard cheese and the soft cheeses doesn't dry out the tannins, and that's what is the beauty of them. So obviously, in this case, you can even have sort of a bit strong camembert, brie, or the blue cheeses. That works quite well. And it doesn't become bitter, which is nice. So I've done a lot of food pairing with that, but also the hard cheeses, the Swiss Gruyere or the Comté or something like that, which have got that little bit nutty flavors. The dry hard cheeses works very well. That you can use as well. The dry cheeses, the hard cheeses, you can use both with the Juventud and the Attitude as well, because you don't have to clash with the tannins.
Okay, excellent. So a little away from Monastrell and more back to you. You are the winery is very involved in something called plastic change.
Yes.
can you explain what that is and why it's important to you? And
basically, what we linked up is we have an agreement with a hotel company called goodwings.com. And every time we travel and spend money on our hotel spending, instead of using money on Google, the saving goes because we're not doing it via Google. We can spend the money saved on Plastic Change, which is an NGO that trying to change our world and trying to influence politicians, decision makers around the world to implement laws that can reduce the amount of plastic we use on a daily basis. They're also trying to influence big companies in thinking about how to reduce the amount of plastic they use. I know they have influenced a company like the big brewery Carlsberg, where you have the 6-packs with the plastic you normally put around. They have made a different policy now, so they have a pattern where they glue the 6 cans next to each other, so you don't need the plastic. These kind of things is something we are a great fan of, and I think if we can change and we can get the bigger player, the bigger supermarkets and all that to make their effort, I think we all can make the world a little bit better place to live. So that is our small contribution.
Well, I like that a lot, and especially the whole, I was so happy to hear that whole Carlsberg thing with that, because we spend so much effort. Well, it's really not a lot of effort, but we do. Every time we have any of those rings, we're always cutting them for the animals, to protect the animals.
Yes.
So I was happy to hear that. And then I had to ask you, because I didn't really understand the picture, or I was hoping I was seeing, you have a picture on the website of a pelican. Do you know what I'm talking about? As the picture's kind of rotated through. It had to do with the plastic change, and I didn't know if it had to do with the animals being injured by the plastic.
We've seen dreadful pictures of birds getting trapped with these things, a lot of plastic, and then these kind of things where we can make just by changing our habits as a consumer. And if we sort of choose different kind of packaging, if we choose different product, the big manufacturer of these products will change. Right? And we can do it a little bit we can help NGOs influence our politician. If we as a consumer can do something ourselves at that, then we become very powerful, and then companies will change their way of dealing with these matters.
And can people just can us little people be part of that also? Are they on?
People are just going to Plastic Change, going and Google Plastic Change, and then you are part of a movement that's growing day by day.
Okay.
We as such, we're doing it through this company called goodwings.com, where just by when we travel, and when you're going to travel again, then you can book through Goodwings.
It's plastic.
You can just spend it donated to Plastic Change. And it's nice, when we all travel, we 28 people travel a lot, and it's nice to be able to contribute that way.
Right, absolutely. And my last question is dealing with your, and I'm going to say it wrong, Gran Allegranza?
Correct.
Is another label you have?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That is a beautiful image. The celebration of life. You've got the image is like an amalgamation of flowers, a vineyard, a woman. So can you tell us about that wine? And is that eventually going to be exported to the United States, or does that?
It's actually something we've done a lot in Asia. We're doing it a lot, very successful in Europe, and we want to introduce it to the US market here next year. And basically, we want to communicate in a different way with first of all, it was peculiar because we want to communicate with our female consumers. It has turned out that a lot of female and also a lot of male consumers appreciate this style of label and the way we want to deal with it. So through big data, through a lot of Google search, through a lot of Facebook and all that stuff, we identified our consumer who appreciate these wines are people in the 30s and 40s who are well-educated people, who are very opinionated people, but who likes a nice glass of wine. And It's not that we want to discriminate. If you're younger or older, you by all means welcome to drink these wines. But we have a range called Allegranza, and then we have the big brother Gran Allegranza, and that's our interpretation from Alicante. It's a Monastrell, where the other ones are Tempranillo. So this is quite interesting because the Monastrell in Alicante, where we produce it, make wine not too dissimilar to Gran Pasas. They're not as heavy as the wine from Jumilla. But they have that lovely richness, and they have that lovely velvety style, and we have managed to achieve. So that's kind of a niche product for us.
And another beautiful label.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for telling us, because they spend a lot of time trying to do that, the design.
Wine labels. If I knew nothing about you and I walked into a wine shop, I would grab your bottles. They
are beautiful. They are beautiful.
Labels.
Thank you.
I mean, they're very catching. They're beautiful. They're, you know, it almost brings an excitement, but yet a calmness over you. You're not trying to figure out what's in the bottle. It's stated right there very clearly, and I really like your packaging a lot.
Thank you. We really spend a lot of time in trying to make attractive labels. And attractive label, what is that? I mean, it can be many things. But I think when we try to do it, and when we want to appeal, obviously, to a lot of people, we know it ourselves. When you look at another person, you are accessing that person's trying to say, do you find it attractive? Do you think the person's got nice eyes or beautiful smile or whatever? And that's the same with a wine label. You need to, that first kind of opportunity you have to shine.
Absolutely. So, anything else?
Well, we are kind of coming up to our hour, so I just want to say, if somebody was listening to this and they just were going to the end and we were doing 3 fast facts about Monastrell, 3 things that you think people should remember about Monastrell, what would that be?
I personally find when a Monastrell is good, it's got that fantastic lush fruit. It's got that beautiful spicy note, which is very charming. And then it's got, in my opinion, a good richness, which is making a wine that is in balance when it's well made.
I
would reach for it.
And then we didn't actually ask earlier, and I don't know if you know this or not. Do you know the genetics of it? Where Monastrell came from? Is it?
I'm afraid not. I don't.
Okay. I didn't find it. So when I was looking, I'm not sure if they even know exactly where.
Yeah, and I kind of asked that at the beginning, because did it come from France, find its way down to Spain, or but no, right. It said it's always been in Spain. It's always been there.
It's when you taste Mourvedre from France. I mean, obviously it is quite distinct. It can be more spices, more sort of got a lot more herbs, depending when you get it from. A little bit cooler compared to the Spanish style, which is adapted to a more harsh climate compared to the French.
And that's just like anywhere. You can have the same grape. It's going to express itself differently because of the environment it's being raised in.
Absolutely.
So.
And if somebody's looking for Hamekin Cellars, where can they find you on social media?
They can find us on social media, Hammeken Cellars, on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We're everywhere. So you can do, and there's a lot of activities. So there's a lot of fun things popping up all the time.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight, taking time out of your,
Thank you so much, Debbie. Thank you, Lori.
Dinner time.
Thank you.
A lot of fun.
Really appreciate it. It's been wonderful. You've got great wines, you've got great packaging, and thank you for sharing your knowledge of Monastrell with us.
Yes, and I look forward to tasting them on Thursday when they get here.
Thank you.
But thank you so much. We appreciate it, and we look forward to. I look forward to tasting the wines and hopefully seeing you again in the future when we can actually travel.
Yeah, right.
I would be delighted to see you in Spain.
Yes, we'll put that on our bucket list.
Yes. Yes.
Do that.
To make to Spain. Yes.
And explore Monastrell. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Have a good week.
Have a great week.
Likewise.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.